Have you noticed how the moment your perception shifts, your relationship with the world around you transforms as well? It begins with subtle realizations, perhaps a questioning of assumptions you once took for granted, or a sudden clarity about patterns you had previously accepted without thought. These initial awakenings feel exhilarating, like the first breath of fresh air after being in a stuffy room. But then something unexpected happens. As your consciousness continues to expand, you might notice people around you becoming uncomfortable, distant, even hostile at times. The very same insights that feel liberating to you seem threatening to them. This phenomenon reveals a profound truth about the journey of awakening. As your conscious awareness deepens, the social world often responds by turning away. This experience aligns with what developmental psychologist Jean Piaget discovered about how humans construct knowledge and understanding. Piaget recognized that cognitive development isn't simply a linear accumulation of information, but involves fundamental restructurings of how we perceive and make meaning of reality. When you undergo such a restructuring through spiritual or psychological awakening, you essentially enter a different perceptual reality than those around you, creating a disconnect that can feel like rejection or abandonment by the very world you're trying to understand more deeply. Think about how Piaget described the process of cognitive development in children. Each stage represents not just more knowledge, but a qualitatively different way of organizing and interpreting experience. A child in the concrete operational stage doesn't just know more facts than a child in the pre-operational stage. They literally construct reality differently, with new cognitive capacities that weren't previously available. The awakening of consciousness in adults follows a similar pattern. It's not just that you're learning new information about yourself or the world. You're developing new ways of perceiving, new frameworks for making sense of experience that fundamentally alter your relationship with reality. These shifts happen through what Piaget called the twin processes of assimilation and accommodation. Initially, you try to fit new awarenesses into your existing worldview, but eventually, the discrepancies become too great. Your cognitive frameworks must expand and transform to accommodate new understandings that can't be contained within old structures of meaning. This transformation creates a kind of cognitive disequilibrium, a state of uncomfortable imbalance, as your mind reorganizes itself around new insights and perceptions. But here's where the social dimension becomes particularly challenging. This disequilibrium doesn't just happen within you. It happens between you and others. As your consciousness awakens, you begin to see through cultural narratives and social agreements that most people take as simply the way things are. You might notice the contradictions in political ideologies that others accept without question, or recognize the unacknowledged power dynamics in relationships that others participate in unconsciously. You might become aware of the ecological impacts of everyday choices that others prefer not to see, or the emotional patterns in your family system that have gone unnamed for generations. These perceptions aren't wrong or imaginary. They represent a more complex construction of reality, one that includes dimensions of experience that more conventional frameworks filter out or deny. But here's the painful reality that so many awakening individuals face. Most social systems are designed to maintain stability, not to accommodate transformative insights. When you begin to articulate perceptions that challenge collective assumptions, you're not just sharing ideas. You're disrupting the cognitive equilibrium of the group. From Piaget's perspective, groups, like individuals, develop structures for organizing experience that become increasingly resistant to fundamental change. These collective frameworks provide stability and shared meaning, but they also limit what can be perceived and acknowledged within the social field. When your consciousness expands beyond these limitations, you become a walking, talking source of disequilibrium for others. You're essentially inviting them into a developmental process that many are not ready or willing to undertake. I want to pause here and ask you directly. Have you experienced this turning away as your consciousness has awakened? Have friends, family, or colleagues become distant or defensive when you've shared insights that felt important and true to you? How has it felt to perceive realities that others seem unwilling or unable to acknowledge? If you feel moved to share, please leave a comment below starting with "The world turn away when I," and tell us about your experience. Your story may help others recognize that the rejection they've felt isn't a sign that their perceptions are wrong, but rather a natural consequence of the developmental gap between different levels of consciousness. I read every comment, and your experiences matter not just to me, but to our whole community of awakening individuals navigating this challenging territory together. The social rejection that often accompanies awakening consciousness creates a profound dilemma. On one hand, your expanded perceptions feel more real, more true to your experience than the limited frameworks you've outgrown. The clarity and coherence of these new understandings make it difficult to pretend you don't see what you see, to act as if you still believe what you no longer believe. On the other hand, expressing these perceptions often leads to painful disconnection from others whose acceptance and understanding you value. This creates a kind of double bind. Speak your truth and face rejection, or suppress your authentic perceptions to maintain belonging. Neither option feels sustainable, yet many awakening individuals find themselves oscillating between these poles, uncertain how to honor their evolving consciousness, while preserving meaningful connection with others. This dilemma reflects another aspect of Piaget's work, his recognition that cognitive development always occurs within a social context. Piaget observed that children's thinking evolves partly through their interactions with others who challenge their existing understanding and offer alternative perspectives. Similarly, your awakening consciousness needs engagement with others for healthy development, both those who share your expanded perceptions and those who challenge them in constructive ways. When the social world turns away, it deprives you of this essential developmental context, leaving you to navigate complex perceptual territories without the guidance and reflection that social connection provides. This can lead to what some spiritual traditions call spiritual bypassing, where genuine insights become distorted through isolation, lacking the corrective feedback that community provides. The solution isn't to suppress your awakening consciousness to maintain social approval, nor is it to reject the social world entirely in favor of isolated spiritual development. Rather, it involves finding or creating social context that can support the continued evolution of your consciousness, while providing authentic connection with others. This might mean seeking out communities of practice where expanded awareness is valued and cultivated, or developing relationships with mentors or guides who have navigated similar territory. It might mean learning to translate your perceptions into languages that can be received by those at different stages of development, or cultivating compassion for the developmental processes of others, recognizing that consciousness unfolds according to its own timing, not according to our preferences or expectations. This brings us to another important aspect of Piaget's theory, the concept of developmental readiness. Piaget observed that children can't be forced into more advanced cognitive stages before they're developmentally ready. Attempting to teach concepts that require formal operational thinking to a child still in the concrete operational stage creates frustration rather than growth. Similarly, you can't force others to see through your awakened eyes if they haven't developed the perceptual frameworks needed to hold what you're perceiving. This doesn't mean your perceptions are wrong or that others are somehow deficient. It simply reflects the reality that consciousness evolves through stages that can't be skipped or forced. Understanding this can help alleviate the frustration and isolation that comes when others don't receive or validate your insights, allowing you to hold your perceptions with conviction while extending compassion to those whose development follows a different timeline. The social turning away that accompanies awakening consciousness also serves an important developmental function. Piaget recognized that some degree of cognitive disequilibrium is necessary for growth. Without the discomfort of encountering information that doesn't fit our existing frameworks, we have little motivation to develop more complex understanding. Similarly, the social rejection that often follows awakening creates a kind of relational disequilibrium that can catalyze further development. When you can no longer rely on external validation or shared assumptions to orient your understanding, you're forced to develop greater internal coherence and autonomy. You learn to trust your own perceptions even when they're not reflected back by others, to find stability within the unfolding process of consciousness rather than in fixed frameworks of belief or belonging. This doesn't mean the pain of rejection isn't real or significant. The human need for connection and understanding runs deep, and the experience of having your perceptions dismissed or denied by those you care about can be genuinely traumatic. But understanding this pain in the context of consciousness development can help transform it from a personal wound into a meaningful aspect of your evolutionary journey. The turning away of the world isn't a punishment for seeing too clearly. It's a necessary friction that helps refine and integrate your awakening awareness, developing it from initial insights into embodied wisdom that can be lived and shared in ways that serve rather than separate. As your consciousness continues to evolve, you may find that the initial turning away gives way to new forms of connection based on more authentic seeing and being seen. Just as Piaget described how cognitive development moves toward greater complexity and integration, spiritual development tends to move from dualistic either/, or thinking toward more nuanced both/ and understanding. The apparent opposition between personal truth and social belonging reveals itself as a developmental tension rather than an irreconcilable conflict. You begin to discover ways of honoring your perceptions without imposing them on others, of creating connective spaces where different levels of awareness can interact without demanding conformity or rejection. You learn to hold your knowing more lightly, recognizing it not as absolute truth, but as your current best construction of reality, one that will continue to evolve as your consciousness expands further. This more integrated relationship with both your own awareness and the social world doesn't happen automatically. It requires intentional practice and ongoing development of what we might call metacognitive capacities, the ability to reflect on your own thinking processes, to hold awareness of how you're constructing reality rather than simply being identified with your current construction. Piaget recognized that advanced cognitive development involves not just more sophisticated thinking, but greater awareness of thinking itself. Similarly, awakened consciousness involves not just expanded perception, but expanded awareness of the perceptual process, a capacity to witness how consciousness constructs reality without becoming rigid or dogmatic about any particular construction. This meta-awareness allows you to hold your perceptions with both conviction and humility, to communicate them in ways that invite rather than demand, to remain open to continual refinement and evolution of your understanding. If these words have touched something in you, if you felt that spark of recognition that comes when your experience is finally named and validated, I invite you to join our growing community of souls navigating the sometimes challenging journey of awakening consciousness. By subscribing to this channel, you're not just accessing content. You're connecting with others who understand the experience of seeing what many prefer not to see, of holding awareness that hasn't yet entered collective understanding. Each video is created as an offering to those walking this path, providing perspectives and insights that might illuminate your unique journey of consciousness development. This isn't about building numbers or metrics. It's about nurturing connections among those committed to authentic perception and expression, creating a field of mutual support for the evolution of consciousness. The world may indeed turn away when your consciousness awakens, but this turning away isn't the end of the story. It's a transitional phase in a larger developmental process, one that ultimately leads toward more authentic forms of connection and community. The initial rejection you experience reflects not a failure of your perception, but a natural consequence of seeing beyond collective agreements about what is real or important. As painful as this rejection can be, it serves the development of your consciousness, creating space for your awareness to deepen and clarify without the distorting influences of premature consensus or false belonging. The turning away of the familiar world makes space for a new world to emerge, one constructed through more conscious participation in the creative process of reality making. This developmental perspective doesn't diminish the real challenges of navigating awakened consciousness in a world that often prefers comfortable illusions to uncomfortable truths. But it does offer a framework for understanding these challenges as meaningful aspects of an evolutionary journey rather than personal failures or cosmic punishments. The social friction you encounter isn't evidence that you're doing something wrong, but that you're participating in the leading edge of consciousness development, holding awareness that hasn't yet been integrated into collective understanding. This position brings unique responsibilities and opportunities, asking you to hold your perceptions with both conviction and compassion, to speak truth that serves awakening rather than simply disrupts stability, to create bridges of understanding across developmental differences rather than reinforcing separation. As we continue to navigate this journey together, remember that the world's turning away is not a reflection of your worth or the validity of your perceptions. It's a natural response to the disequilibrium that awakening consciousness creates in systems designed for stability rather than transformation. Your role isn't to force others to see what you see, but to hold space for the natural evolution of consciousness, to embody your understanding in ways that invite rather than demand, to create conditions that support awakening without rushing or bypassing essential developmental processes. In this way, what begins as painful rejection can transform into meaningful participation in our collective evolution, your individual awakening becoming a gift not just to your own development, but to the unfolding consciousness of our shared world.